If those who knew you best could pick one word to describe you, what do you think it would be? And if you could pick one word that you would want people to remember you by, what would that be? And would those two words be the same? Right? In other words, the word that people would use to describe you and the word that you want to be remembered by, would they overlap? Well, as we go back to our study in 1 Corinthians and our devotional theme entitled Chaos in Corinth, now we're going to see that the primary way in which that chaos will be overcome is through love. So we'll be in chapter 13 this week. I'm excited for it. It is often referred to as the love chapter. So I'm going to read verses 1 through 3. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Now it's important to remember where chapter 13 is placed in this book. Right? It is directly in between the two longest chapters on spiritual gifts. Coincidence? Well, I don't think so. Right? The spiritual gifts in the church of Corinth were actually becoming a means by which people were dividing, becoming prideful, and creating a hierarchy of gifts. Now the culture at the time, which in some ways is very similar to ours, was putting a huge premium on wisdom, on oratory skills, and certain gifts that were seen as flashy. And therefore, what the culture had valued was beginning to seep into the church and becoming what the church valued. Now, these spiritual gifts, which were gracious gifts from God, were supposed to be a means by which the gospel was furthered, a means in which the church was built up. But instead, the opposite is happening. And so what we see is what we value most is ultimately what we will seek after. Now, Jesus didn't say that by our spiritual gifts, all people will know that we are his disciples. Instead, he said, by our love for one another, people will know we are his disciples. But doesn't it make sense to value that which will reveal that we are his disciples? The spiritual gifts, right, they were supposed to be a means by which these brothers and sisters, they would love one another, not compete with one another. And so here's the tragedy of what's going on. As a result of God's grace, and perhaps even as a means to answered prayer, people are utilizing these spiritual gifts to completely apart from love. And sadly, the way that they wanted others to think of them and to kind of show off their gifts, that had become more important than the way that they loved one another. Do you realize that oftentimes the areas that you and I excel at and are gifted at have the greatest potential to either convey love or to demean someone? Right? And if we value those gifts and see them as a platform to puff ourselves up rather than love, we will have just completely nullified the intent of why we have such gifts. So I want to leave you with this question. Would one word that people use to describe you, would it be love? And then to follow that up, how can you begin to use your spiritual gifts as a means to convey love?